has your start of 2026 been?
It's always like you hit the ground running for ourselves, just where the Vancouver International Film Festival falls in the calendar. Our submissions open in January, third week of January, so kind of get back to the office after the holiday break, and then you're getting everything together for that. We getting our contract programmers signed up for the festival as well, and then we've also been doing kind of a recruiting refresh for our screening committees as well to build those out. So it's a lot of moving pieces, and then the festival season elsewhere begins right away. So you're getting overtures for films that are at Sundance or setting up meetings for Berlin in a couple weeks, and yeah, it all happens at once.
What are the festival lineups that you're going to be heading to scout the films, and but then also to have a look at the film festival industry in general before going back to VIFF and kind of rounding it up?
Yeah, each year I go to the Berlinale and the European Film Market as well, which runs parallel to it. And then also Cannes and the Marché in May. And then there's usually like a couple of, I will go to TIFF in September as well. And there's a couple of like outliers that happen as well. Like so last year I got to go to the Jeonju Film Festival in Korea. Year before I went to Hot Docs in the spring and IDFA in Amsterdam kind of at the end of the year. So I think there's usually one or two wild cards that kind of pop up into the mix, and it's like a chance to see how film presentation happens in those other spaces, kind of like the networking events they provide for filmmakers, the industry events. Trying to get kind of like a feel for the overall ecosystem, but also like the things that make each of these festivals really specific. And then there's always like an extensive wish list as well. So Rune Nur, who's our documentary programmer, will be going to True False, the documentary festival in March. And then for myself, CPH Docs in Copenhagen remains like kind of top of the wish list of things I'd really love to see in person.
Right. Now, reflecting back on VIFF last year in 2025, and you having gone to all these film festivals before VIFF as well, what anchor points did you and your programming team kind of set out in curating the themes, the stories, but also the visual expressions that you see for VIFF?
Well, yesterday, it seems like yesterday. Last year was like a unique year, I guess they all are, but it was a year where two of our longstanding programmers took like significant steps towards retirement. And then we brought on Rune, who I mentioned earlier, as a documentary programmer, brought on a couple of associate programmers as well. So it was like a new complexion to the programming team, but also like a year where everyone's responsibilities like shifted quite dramatically as well. So I think it was early stages of the year were really about ourselves, just kind of like learning how to work together in these kind of new capacities and these new areas of responsibility, new portfolios. And I think it was really rewarding to have we would have weekly meetings with the entire group. And then sometimes I would break them out into like smaller groups, like to talk about documentaries or talk about Asian cinema, talk about kind of the Canadian BC cinema as well. And so I think this year it's exciting to kind of be able to move forward with like that kind of model in place and see what we can build from that, kind of knowing how we interact with each other.
Right.
And having a lot of people coming back to those spaces. And then I think, in terms of themes, I know there are like some festivals that are very, I always wonder if they go in with a theme in mind, or, at the end of it, they're like, this is the governing theme for the entire festival. And like, you can kind of make it make sense if you look at things through that prism or through that lens. So I think we always try to, because I try to, as director of programming, try to create a system in which like the programmers have like a level of autonomy and agency in their spaces, but maybe my role is to kind of think about like the overall complexion of the festival and the balance of things, like whether that's regional balance or gender representation, elements like this as well. So while I want each of the programmers to think about their kind of portfolio and the films within them and like what's exciting them, then I try to kind of think about the more macro level of it. So I think that what happens because of that is you see like some kind of small constellations of themes within the festival. And then those end up kind of echoing across like the sections as well. So you might see something like in the Insights documentary section that is dealing with this one particular concern in a region of the world, but it might be equally represented in a film like in the Northern Lights section by a Vancouver-based filmmaker and things like this. So in those meetings, it's an opportunity for us to talk about, whether it's kind of diasporic stories that have a particularly like nomadic quality to them, or how we're seeing last year, like one theme that came up was kind of like the situations that the labor class in different regions are dealing with. And we saw that like in narrative films, but also in documentary films. So I try not to be too prescriptive about this. And I think it's, I started one of my first sections to program for the festival with short films.
Mm.
And I would always kind of resist the practice that happens in some spaces to say like this short film program is like about this, and I think it just kind of ruins it,
Right.
in some respect to tell people what you think it's about. And I think that with the short film packages, I always wanted people to kind of come away with what maybe was maybe they saw what I saw as the connective tissue between those films, or maybe they came to their own conclusions in that space. So I think that with a festival of 150 feature films and 90 shorts, or maybe a little bit north of that, you have this opportunity to kind of like follow your own pathway through it that's kind of governed by what's concerning you as an individual or as a filmmaker or as a cinephile, but kind of like see where those kind of branching points occur for yourself as well. And I think it ultimately, everyone kind of embarks in their own act of curation when they're seeing multiple films within a festival as well.
Right. Now that you talked about the Northern Lights program, alongside with just incredible programs like Vanguard, you have special presentations. What do you see as kind of the central themes that were pulsating through a lot of the BC filmmaking work last year, not just with VIFF, but perhaps in conversations with other artists that is BC based or Canadian based?
I think that last year was a year where it was kind of underscored that a lot of the Vancouver or the Vancouver filmmakers featured in the festival last year really were like international filmmakers who happened to make their work here in Vancouver. And I think that was evident through a number of stories that, be they documentaries or narratives that were not necessarily set within this city. Thinking about films like Jennifer Chu's Clan of the Painted Lady, for instance, which does have elements that are situated in the Lower Mainland, but is much broader in its lens. And I think that there has been this movement in recent years that I feel I've seen, where these films are more in like an international dialogue, and I think they're films that both see the filmmakers like in some respects being comfortable in their own skins, but also like being comfortable in the discomfort as well. And so they're films that kind of find people searching for clarity around identity, or an understanding of what it means to be in this geographic space and the history that comes with it as well. And I think there's like, really interesting kind of like points of friction within them as well. Some of the early years of the Telefilm Talent to Watch funding programs, you kind of like went through the films that were being funded, and there's a lot of coming of age films. And I think even when we broaden the view to like a national production level, I think just like the work that is being funded through these models has changed quite substantially. And there are people like Mayumi, the director of Akashi, who was rightfully like an agitator in that space to like change some of the kind of considerations for funders like Telefilm and others about like what constitutes a Canadian film. Yeah. And I think we're now seeing some of the outcomes of that as well.
For you, in your own terms and from your perspective as well, what constitutes a Canadian film, and what does even Canadian identity look like?
I really hope this isn't a cop-out at all, but I think that there's like a beauty in like the permeability of that, or like the amorphous nature of that as well. And I think this may be kind of going back to some of those like there's many a year when I was like first involved with the festival where like almost all the narrative first features would be coming of age stories, and some of them were beautifully rendered, like beautifully done. But I just think that the confidence of the filmmakers to tell stories that are specific to their own experience, specific to their community's experiences as well, is something that has manifested. So I think that maybe what is increasingly defining what is a Canadian film is like, again, kind of just that emergence of really distinctive voices within that space, rather than it being something really homogenous. And I think there's a really real beauty to that as well, of being able to see these films that sit side by side within a section and yet like represent such tremendously different lived experiences, but also filmmaking practices, maybe be they community or global concerns as well. So I think that, in terms of what filmmakers may want to look at in terms of like their funding applications and things like this, I think it really is about demonstrating that there's a unique perspective that's being brought to this. Those stories that are being told about communities by members of those communities. So I know that like with telefilm, you will have a community engagement plan that needs to be submitted with it. And so I think that the ability to articulate of the process you've gone through, either through your own evolution as an individual and as an artist, or like the work that you're doing within those spaces to ensure that the representation of these stories is being done in the right way. And I think that is another element of this, is this kind of increased notable like ethical approach to filmmaking and equity in these spaces as well.
To talk about representation and also what you said about a lot of BC filmmakers that happen to make their films in BC, but they are international filmmakers. In an interview you said with Playback Daily, you said that there's been a history of referring to these folks as local filmmakers or filmmakers in your backyard. And to re-amplify what you said is that it's really important for VIFF and for us to position them as international filmmakers. How does that look like? Can you elaborate more on that? I think it's important not to also pigeonhole what BC filmmaking can look like.
Yeah, and I think part of that is, not just the exhibition of the films, but a key development for VIFF last year was bringing on director of artist and industry programs in Anna Belen Asfura is the person who's in that role, so I should mention her by name as well. But I think that what people will see at VIFF is like a real dramatic evolution of our industry programs in future years. And how do we create opportunities for those filmmakers to not just have these viewing experiences, these engagements with audiences or their colleagues within the Canadian space, but as we're bringing delegations here from Korea last year and this year from other nations as well, how do we create these opportunities for engagement with them? And I know that for ourselves also, like how we bring increasingly more international curators or perhaps like other decision makers onto our juries, elements like this as well. I don't know the exact outcomes of this, but I know that, right in the wake of the festival last year, one of our jurors who was here from another international festival immediately extended like 3 invites to first-time Canadian feature filmmakers, or two debut features, 1 sophomore feature, because of the work they had seen like in the jury spaces as well. So I think that's like a key piece for ourselves of how we create a platform, but not just for audiences to engage with this work, but for international kind of decision makers to engage with this work, and just like seeing some of the immediate outcomes of just like the first-hand encounter with the work, the opportunity to see Q&As with the filmmakers as well, and to know the ability for not just people to tell their stories on screen, but to express those experiences in discourse, be it with an audience or like on an industry panel, things like this as well. I think are all pieces that will allow us to establish VIFF as like a key piece for creating these through lines, these channels into the international festival ecosystem as well.
Yeah. When you think about all the film festivals you've been through, what sort of inspirations do you take from these international partnerships to bring home?
I think that there's like some maybe more obvious things, like if you go to, or when you go to Berlinale, like the level of technical exhibition is just so pristine, and I think that everything is just like, I have not been a filmmaker there, but I imagine the filmmakers there feel like tremendously cared for and a sense of confidence. Like it's an incredibly nerve-wracking piece, to go and present your work for the first time. So know that you're kind of in this space where everything is tremendously well organized, and that when the film is to go up, it goes up perfectly, and the sound sounds as it should. So I think there's like some elements like that are like, our technical team are incredibly strong. So knowing that we can bring that to the fore, and then knowing that our administrative team who take care of the filmmakers and and guest team who take care of their ticket requests, elements like this, there's a level of care there, I think is really important. And then I think there's some elements that we've kind of worked to introduce on the a little bit behind the scenes from like the public view. So last year we introduced a director's dinner that doubled as our kind of awards event as well. And it was, I think it started at 6:30 or 6 p.m., something like that. And at 10 p.m., like people were still there hanging around, like talking to each other. And it's just the space to bring together, 70 or 80 filmmakers, both from Vancouver, from Canada, international, into a space where they could just appreciate each other and appreciate each other's work as well. And, have a chance to just meet some of maybe the VIFF programmers they hadn't had, who weren't directly responsible for their work being in the festival, but have a sense of like the folks who make VIFF run in that space as well. So I think that there's those tiny things. And then, some things are just like about, how you bring more distinct identity to the sections within a festival. And I think that's something that, as our programming team evolves, that we're really working to do. How we have filmmakers now reaching out, say like, oh, I think my film would be a good fit for Vanguard or for Spectrum, international filmmakers who are more clearly understanding how we're curating work here at VIFF as well.
Now that we have touched on the filmmaking side, it's also so important to talk about the function of a film festival like VIFF for the community and audiences who come from so many different walks of life, whether it be filmmakers, student filmmakers, or just someone who really loves cinema. How have you seen the audience's appetite and desire to be at a film festival like VIFF change throughout the year? Let's say we have, the rise of streaming services during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
which, yes, provides so many exciting opportunities for accessibility. But at the same time, I think we've seen that attitude to be a bit jaded. Now there's a big, want to go back to the film festival.
Yeah, I mean, we were a streaming service for 1 year in 2020, and like did pretty well by it. I know the Cine, who's the company who provided the streaming service for us. After the festival, remember them having a debriefing meeting with them, and they're like, "Do you know how good your numbers were?" I'm like, "No, we have no point of reference for it, But to your point, like I know, even in my family, like my parents, I went to their place for dinner after the festival, and my dad was like, "Oh yeah, we watched this like Serbian movie that was really good." I'm like, who am I talking to right now? And just like the kind of opportunity for people to explore a bit more. And I think there's also this element of people who are really invested in the festival in like their 20s and 30s, and then maybe have a family and move to the suburbs and can't access it again. But then there was this, you have a lot of access to back-end information with the streaming service. So like in 2021, when we did it again, combined with many more in-person events, you could see how people's viewing patterns changed. And you could see like people watching like 10 minutes of a film and then stopping, or like watching like 15 minutes and then like the same IP address, like 4 hours later, like watching another 30 minutes of the film or something like this, which is not how a film is meant to be seen. So I think that it was really interesting to see like how quickly people adopted things, but how quickly, you said jaded, or like just people's kind of like our lesser nature sometimes of like attention spans and like things like this really manifesting in that space. So for ourselves, it's been like tremendously heartening to see the in-person attendance for the festival. Last year we added 2 new venues in the Granville Island stage, as well as the Alliance Francaise at 45th and Canby. And our numbers for both those venues, like they were commensurate with like a film that sold out elsewhere would sell out at Granville Island if it was 50% at somewhere else, it would be 50% at Granville Island. Like people went there, and that was fantastic to see. And it was a nice space for screenings. For the festival last year, we were about 86,000 people for film screenings, and then another 20,000 people across all the other events and industry events. So it really was like, when you get to those 105,000 people, it's, in this country, you always have to kind of remove TIFF from the conversation because it's just such a different beast,
Right.
But that does solidly make VIFF the second largest festival in this country, and one of the largest in North America as well in terms of like pure audience turnout. So that's incredibly rewarding to know that we can like invite filmmakers to the festival, not only bring out an audience for them, but I think bring out like a very well-versed in cinema audience as well. I think the Q&As that happen at VIFF are of a higher caliber than a number of other festivals I've been to in North America, and I think we hear that from both domestic and international filmmakers in that space. So I think that we have seen this kind of like resurgence of people wanting to experience things in cinemas. And going back a couple years ago, I know Casey Wei, who is our short form programmer, she was saying filmmakers visiting from Taiwan was like, this is like an interesting festival because like the audience is like, yeah, there are like a lot of old white people. There's also like a lot of like BIPOC people, and a lot of them are queer, and like it's an interesting festival. And I think we have seen this renewal of audience. And I think that's something that's been really rewarding as well. It's like seeing a culture shift within the festival audience as well over the last couple of years of as it becomes more intergenerational, just like an audience that's more appreciative maybe of what we have now again after having had it taken away during the pandemic, and people that I think are more welcoming and gracious and to the filmmakers, to each other as well. And it's just been a really lovely space to be in the last couple of years. And I think there's like, I can point to some things that contribute to that, but then I think that those 85,000 people coming out to the screenings like are each responsible for contributing to that as well. And I do think that the films that are shown as well play a role in that, and when you're watching work by filmmakers who are expressing themselves from a space of vulnerability potentially, or candidness or openness, I think it lends itself to that kind of screening space as well.
For VIFF being a film festival, but there are so many moving elements of, you have live music, you have live installation, you also have the Catalyst program that runs alongside with the film festival. Why is it so important to have those moving elements that are beyond just these screenings, these panels that we see in a lot of film festivals, but different forms of art that constitute what we think is art in film?
Yeah, I think that we like to think of them as like celebrations or expressions of cinema culture as well. So when there is live music, there's always a visual element to it as well, which is like one of the kind of requisites for it. And I think there are those opportunities to just, maybe it's like, I know for myself, like when I go to a festival, there are many a meeting to be had, but then I think maybe it's almost a response to like this block of meetings I have. When I go to the films, then I'm just like hitting one after another, and like we'll see kind of 4 or 5 films in a day. And I think those opportunities for these kind of like punctuation marks, or these like different phrasings of the festival experience for audiences, are really vital as well. And I think something we've seen over, maybe it was about 3 years ago, if not 3, definitely 2 years ago, was kind of this like shift again from audiences as to like, why are you doing these live? And maybe this is more like long-standing audience members, like, why are you doing these live pieces? To like, oh, it's so exciting this is happening. Like I went to the Chan Center and saw this, or saw this other event that happened at the Playhouse. And I think, so yeah, from that exhibition side of things, finding these different permutations of things that kind of allow people that opportunity to recontextualize, like how they think about the moving image and how they think about their own way of engaging with it, and the different disciplines that play into it as well. So there was the Sam Green 32 Sounds event a couple years ago. Again, we're like thinking about how audio kind of plays into the cinema experience. And I think those opportunities to kind of like reframe not, obviously we have many hundreds of screenings that unfurl in a rather traditional way. But again, I think that, be it curatorial notes beforehand or Q&A afterwards, again, it's just one more way of shifting how people perceive something or consider what they've just perceived. And then when we get into things like Catalyst and elements like this, that, these cohort-based programs that kind of run in tandem with the festival, I think that that is, again, delivering an audience for a film is like one part of a festival's responsibility. But I think when you're a festival of our size, how you can play a role in building networks for filmmakers, for playing some part in like galvanizing a film community in this space as well, is really essential. And then how that kind of plays into um, the greater industry programs. And I think that for ourselves, our industry programs moving forward will be this kind of combination of like smaller cohort-based pieces, and then pieces that are wider, that are open to a wider audience as well. And how we kind of like, again, find these different inflection points or these different ways of people investigating their own practice, or be it, something they're just finding their first or making their first forays into, or something that they, are later in their career and want to rethink some element. Maybe they're thinking about hybrid documentary now, and there's a good opportunity there. And I think that VIFF is unique in having this really strong music component to it. So I think that something like the Composer Filmmaker Accelerator, where we match 4 filmmakers with 3 composers, and I know, having talked to a couple of the filmmakers who went through that last year, like just the ideas that open up for themselves about their own work when they hear it with like 3 different pieces, see the same scene from one of their films with 3 different pieces of music uniquely composed for it. And I know one filmmaker was just talking about like how that opened up ideas for them about like not just that film, but like how they might explore even the same characters in this film in different work. And I think, for filmmakers, that I've heard from them that, when you hear it with music, that's kind of like the first chance to see their own film for the first time as well. So I think these opportunities for like how creating these opportunities for filmmakers to reappraise or approach their work from a different angle as well is really essential.
And another part that is so exciting about VIFF every year, specifically this year, is the spotlight on Korea, the new breed, which highlights 6 features from South Korea. And I was wondering, what does it mean for VIFF to really pioneer these overseas collaborations? Because I also know that there's a co-treaty underway for Canada and South Korea.
Yeah, which has been a long time coming. And we actually had a meeting just last week with someone from the embassy in Seoul, the Canadian embassy in Seoul, and they promise it's coming very, very fast. But I think that, yeah, these are these opportunities of where we kind of, again, create these channels or bridges between VIFF and other festivals. And that, we talked before about what that means for Vancouver filmmakers, but I think there's also a real opportunity for how we create, renew VIFF as this platform, this showcase for international filmmakers here. And, when we talk about rewarding elements from last year's festival, to be able to screen 6 first features by South Korean filmmakers, 3 of those being world premieres, and having, I think, every one of those being, if not, sold out close to it. And just, again, having not only the diasporic community here in Vancouver, the Lower Mainland, come out to those films, but people like myself, whose like cinephilia was partly rooted in like experiencing South Korean cinema for the first time. Like that was certainly part of my film upbringing by going to VIFF and seeing work by filmmakers like Hong Sang-soo and others. So I think it is important of how we create audiences and opportunities to really take a deep dive into a particular region of work. But then also, on the kind of hidden from public view last year, we had opportunities for like that delegation of Korean filmmakers to meet with a delegation of the Directors Guild of Canada and talk about potential collaborations moving forward. And that'll be another piece that's really key for ourselves of how we, as we look to have a country of focus every year, how they engage with the Canadian and international filmmaking community who's gathering here in Vancouver. And And I know from that conversation with the sorry, the member, the staff member from the embassy in Seoul last week, that she was saying like the level of excitement that remains about like that collaboration that happened last year is very, very high. And how do we maintain that momentum moving forward for co-productions between Canada and Korea? And then for VIFF, for ourselves, it's about how do we create these partnerships each year. So we had the South Korean focus. We also had a partnership with Swiss Films that saw Ramon and Sylvain Zerker, two very internationally well-regarded filmmakers, come here, do a retrospective of their 3 feature films. They did a lab for filmmakers and a public-facing talk. And so how do we like continue to bring, be it delegations from South Korea or filmmakers from South Korea and Switzerland, through these partnerships we established last year, while also adding the new components this year, so that it also creates a wider base of filmmakers who are coming here to Vancouver every year, to not only allow those networks to build between Vancouver filmmakers and them, but also their international colleagues as well. You know, a curator we had here from South Korea was like, I've never had a chance to meet the Zerker brothers before, but I got to do it here in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And if you think about that 3 to 5 years down the line, when you just exponentially it grows to, well, my math is terrible, it always has been, but you know, like kind of like 10 or 12 nations that are represented in different aspects within the festival, and just the possibilities that arise from these very organic interactions in those spaces.
Looking ahead, what are the initiatives at VIFF that you are exciting to bring in? If you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we will, I think, kind of emboldened by having added the 2 new venues to the space, or to the footprint for the festival last year. We'll continue to look at adding additional venues to how we kind of function as a festival, and bring the festival into different neighborhoods, which is always exciting. There will be these kind of international partnerships that occur as well. Hopeful of firming one of those up next week. And then we'll probably announce it before the festival as well. And then I really do think that where we're going to see, like, as I said, dramatic growth is like how we provide or you know, be of service to the filmmaking community, filmmakers not only here in the Vancouver area, but nationally and ultimately internationally as well, with our industry and artist programs. And those, there'll be like calls for applications for some of the year-round programs at the end of February, with 3 cohorts that are being formed. So that it's going to start even before the festival, and then those like cohorts will kind of like effectively graduate at the festival as well. So I think that we're already starting to see like how those programs start to be seeded into the year-round programming that we do as well. And I think that for those people who take part in the industry programs, they'll see a really dramatic transformation in that space this year, with like opportunities for some like work in progress screenings that are there to benefit, you know, programmers from other festivals, sales agents, international sales agents visiting, and just how there's more opportunity for discovery in that space beyond just the really essential part of audiences discovering the work, but also opportunity for some catalytic relationship building as well.
But before I let you go, I kind of have a twofold question that I love asking everyone. And you can take this in any direction.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be film related, but I'm sure we're going to find a way to have cinema seeped in there. Are you hopeful? And if you are, what makes you hopeful?
Oh, I am. Because, I mean, I guess in some respects, like, what other choice do you have? And I do think that I'm hopeful because, in part, you know, not only in this part of the world, but I think in other quarters where we've seen the rise of more right-leaning governments, and in part, or as part of that, not only seen intolerance like kind of flourish, but being encouraged in spaces as well in really sad ways. I think that festivals, other opportunities for exhibition of art, are opportunities to be acts of rebellion and acts of resistance in so many ways. And I think that, you know, the work that we were able to share last year at the festival, and that we share at the VIFF Center year round, and the people that we're bringing in to engage in dialogue as well, are all people that are interested in opening a dialogue and sharing something of themselves, but also are being receptive as to what other people want to share about their own experiences as well. And I think that's one small way in which you push back. There are obviously many avenues through how you choose to vote and how you choose to take action and express your where your stances in the streets, things like this as well. But I think in terms of what a gathering of I don't even want to say like-minded people, but I think people who are open-minded can take action is by appreciating one another and how people share work about their own themselves and their experiences as well. And I think that's what gives me hope, is that that people continue to persist in the face of opposition, and many people who are making work now who have already persisted in the face of like systemic barriers to get their work to this space now. Again, thinking about a film like Akashi that had to overcome all these obstacles. And that's but one example. And I think so, yeah, the fact that people persist gives me hope, and that beautiful things come from that persistence is really enriching.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Curtis.
Thank you.